Hello everyone. Recently I've been doing videos on concepts like the Shuttle C and the Jupiter line of rockets, comparators to the Constellation program in the early 21st century, I guess we can call it. And that was mainly to satisfy my own curiosity, but also to make a few points about them and some of the flaws that we might have eventually found, given our more recent experience with SLS, which is sort of a development off of some of these ideas. And then we see what happened with SLS, so we can look back and take a look at those older concepts to see what might have gone wrong, but also judge them in other ways. In response to one of the videos, one of the comments was, "These videos with actual concepts are so interesting. I love them." Well, I want to make a little note. All my videos are about actual concepts. I have many actual concepts, and here I want to talk a little bit about realism. And the fact that just because it's in one of these papers doesn't mean it's the most realistic thing I've ever seen. In fact, some of the concepts that I've seen from people from Kerbal Space Program, and also some of the concepts I've come up with, are sort of more doable than even Starship Super Heavy, with Starship, being refueled 20 times to go to the moon, and, Super Heavy being caught by chopsticks. We are actually a little bit more conservative than some of the ideas that I've seen. Landing on a barge was not a regular thing in Kerbal Space Program. The concepts that I've introduced on my own part, like the Kumo lander, are doable to a certain extent, as long as, we can get things within the masses that I specify and stuff like that. But there's another angle to this that I would like to discuss, and that's that when it comes to Shuttle C, it has basically a 0% chance of being done. And some of the other things that people talk about when it comes to realism, like, could the Soviet Union have beat the United States to the moon, for instance? People find that to be a realistic topic, but it has a 0% chance in our reality, right? It is not possible for the Soviet Union to beat the United States in this reality. That we've already decided that is a done thing. And to some extent, Shuttle C is also a done thing. Well then, what isn't a done thing? Well, some of these advanced engines aren't done things. So some people might say that this nuclear saltwater rocket engine is unrealistic, but it is just futuristic and very difficult to do. But theoretically, it is possible. Theoretically, it's not possible for us to develop some of the failed engines of the 50s and 60s. Those are just not going to come about in our timeline. And those have gone by the wayside. And we actually have better engines now than some of the ones that occur in Realism Overhaul. Those just aren't going to be used. They have a 0% chance of ever flying into space. But this has a small chance of actually flying into space. It's a very small chance, but it's still a chance. So you say there's a chance. Yeah, there's a chance for this, whereas there is 0 chance for some of the things that might otherwise be considered realistic. And it's not just a matter of having papers. There are papers about the Shuttle C. There are papers of the nuclear saltwater rocket engine too. There are papers on fusion. There are papers on antimatter engines. There's papers on everything. And they all sound very official and stuff like that until you actually look at the details. But the progenitors of rocketry, well, when you think about Tsiolkovsky or Goddard, they didn't have rocket engines ready. I mean, Goddard tried to make them, but certainly not the ones that he wanted. But what they were dreaming of was well ahead of their time. And so with the tools that we have, I feel like we should give ourselves a little bit more freedom to take a look at the futuristic things instead of just constantly talking about old concepts all the time. There is a certain amount of curiosity about old concepts, but we shouldn't be too tied down by that. And I really want to move forward and take a look at these futuristic engines and see what we can do with them properly when we might need them. Some of them I've already found just aren't going to happen. The probability that the nuclear saltwater rocket engine is actually going to be used is actually fairly low, because there are lower risk alternatives like the ion engines and stuff like that that can provide comparable specific impulse, at least in compared to this configuration with 9,000 seconds of ISP at the high end, and we don't really need all that thrust. In space, you just don't need that much thrust. So the cult of thrust tends to be overblown. And I'm still working on exactly how to efficiently use hydrogen-fueled thrusters, electric thrusters, and that would be the Vasimir style or something like that. But Vasimir, with its technical problems and superconducting magnets or whatever, is still a lot easier than a nuclear saltwater rocket engine, and that could potentially give us 22,000 seconds of ISP, though not much thrust. Anyway, I'm taking a look at these things, and I hope people will give those concepts as much of a chance as the shuttles, the familiar names. You know, when you see the Jupiter rockets or the shuttle Cs, they pop out because they're familiar, and people have a bias towards familiarity. Oh, that you know, another Saturn rocket, the space shuttle again. You know, and nowadays, you know, Falcons or Starships or stuff like that. There's a bias in favor of the things that we're familiar with, but if there's any place that we should maybe be a little bit more open to newer ideas and futuristic concepts, it's probably with space technology. We should be pioneering in that way. Thinking about these things isn't futile. You know, like thinking about whether a nuclear saltwater rocket engine is actually useful is not a futile gesture. We are in the midst of an AI boom where nobody seems to know exactly what to do with it. They're developing AI very quickly, and it's worth hundreds of billions of dollars, but it isn't clear how useful it is. And so trying to figure out the utility of these things before we develop them might be a good idea. And that's what Tsiolkovsky and Goddard and others did when they were thinking about space technology and how to make rockets. They say we could use it for this, that, you know, make satellites that can monitor this. You know, Arthur C. Clarke came up with geostationary satellites or proposed them, stuff like that. And you know, we can make some headway there instead of just waiting for the technology to happen and then figuring it out. And I think we can all see that the waiting for technology to happen and then figuring out what to do with it is a bit of a problem with the AI stuff. So, yeah, that is my point of view about realism. I think this is as realistic as a lot of the other things. People have different ideas about what realism is. As far as I'm concerned, it's what can actually happen. And that is the thing about the future, not about the past. The past is already written, it's done. And so we already know that certain things have a 100% chance of happening, and certain things have a 0% chance of happening in the past. The future is much more open to interpretation. So with that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.